Welcome to the Journey Mindfulness Podcast, where the inner world meets the infinite. I'm James O'Neill, and together we explore consciousness, the soul, mindfulness, and the mysteries beyond our world, and most importantly, how to integrate all of it into the life you're living right now. Today on the Journey Mindfulness Podcast, I'm joined by Barbara Lamb. Barbara is a world-renowned regression therapist, author, and lecturer who has conducted over 5,000 sessions since 1991, helping people explore extraterrestrial encounters, past lives, and soul purpose. She is a multiple Lifetime Achievement Award recipient for her work in experiencer support and ufology. Her work has been featured on Ancient Aliens, and she has been interviewed many times on Coast to Coast AM and Beyond Belief. Barbara, I'm so grateful to have you here. Your work has touched so many lives, and I don't get to talk to licensed therapists about these topics very often, so it's wonderful to have you here. Thank you for being here.
You're very welcome. Very pleased to be here, and very pleased that you have interest in this particular subject.
Well, at a certain point, you can't ignore it,
right? Right. Although plenty of people still choose to ignore it. Oh, I don't want to pay attention to that, or I don't believe in that. People have told me, not the people who come to me, but other people just out there in life very often will say, "Oh, yeah, I don't pay attention to that. I don't believe in that." But whether they believe in it or not, it's happening that millions of people all over the world are having encounters with these extraterrestrial beings. And in so many cases, they have a little tiny bit of awareness of it, like a moment or a minute, maybe at the most, that they're actually with these beings. But in many, many cases, these visits and experiences happen when the person is asleep or is in some, very relaxed state, maybe, and sort of dozes off, and they're not even aware that the experience is happening. Mm-hmm. And yet, maybe many years later, they'll think, gee, I wonder what that was that time when I was just sitting watching television on my sofa, and suddenly the screen went all kind of blitzy and frantic, and everything seemed different, and there was an unusual light in the room, and it was just really weird, and something like that might have happened. That's pretty typical, and then maybe decades later in their life, they'll think, I keep thinking about that time that I was on the sofa watching TV, etc. And I wonder if anything happened, after that unusual light came in the room. So in a regression, we have the privilege of going back to that event that the person is wondering about. And I suggest that in the relaxation part, getting the person into the state of hypnosis, I suggest that they're going back to relive whatever occurred on that occasion that they've been wondering about. Whether anything happened or not, beyond that, we don't know at that point. But I think it's very helpful for the person to have this sense in the hypnosis of reliving the experience from beginning on, using that example, reclining or sitting back on the sofa and watching television. And then something changed and the screen became all kind of fuzzy and unusual signals on it. And then they were aware of the light in the room. So So we begin at the very beginning of the experience from what the person can consciously remember. But in
Mhm.
the state of hypnosis, it's wonderful because from that very first moment of awareness, we just keep going. And even though the person has been put into a state of non consciousness, the subconscious part of the mind, in the meantime, is it recording everything, every single moment of experience that the person has. And so it's the subconscious part of the mind that can bring up that material to be remembered and having the sense of reliving it in the regression. So the person goes moment by moment by moment through the regression, right through every moment that happened until being returned again. And so much opens up that way for people. Now, other people could say, oh, well, maybe that was their imagination what came up. So I always check with people after the regression, um, how real or not did that seem to you, what you had just experienced in the regression? And invariably they say, oh, yeah, that was real. I hadn't known that before, but reliving it again, I see that was real. That I could not imagine things like that. That just would not
Yeah.
be in my scape of my frame of abilities. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was real. So that's, I think, as close as we can get to the truth of what happened to these things. Um,
Yeah.
that people remember just the first few moments of, if at all. And then, of course, there are many times that people having the missing time experience. And so they're doing something like riding their bicycle or taking a hike or driving a car or riding in a car. And then in the situation with the car, they at least consciously are aware that something's happening to the car. That it seems like it's sort of running out of steam. And usually the driver will pull off the road, which is a good thing. And then they may have consciousness for a few more moments to see that there's a big light that's come down from the sky in front of them and beings coming toward the car. Sometimes they'll remember that much. But sometimes it's happened with many people who've come to me. They've been on a road trip and it seemed like everything was perfectly normal. And when they got to their destination, they realized that it was 2 or 3 or even 4 hours later than it should have been. So they know they had missing time, but they had no uh, sense of the car failing or a light coming toward them or anything like that. Um, so I did one recently, and with that, a husband and wife were driving along, going to the FDR Museum in New York State.
Hmm.
And they set out in the morning and they checked their watches and figured, oh, yeah, we'll be there, in about an hour. And but really, they got there that day, but it was 4 hours later, and they couldn't remember anything peculiar in the least bit, and they went over and over and over it again. And the one thing that they could remember from that drive that kind of stood out was that in front of them was a white car with a trunk that was partly open. They were carrying something large in the trunk, and it had it kind of strapped down so the trunk door wouldn't just fly up. And that's the only thing that they remember in that 1 hour drive. That was just a little bit out of the ordinary, not very much. And so in the regression, it turned out that they actually followed that white car with the trunk strapped down as it went off the highway they were on and went a couple more streets and into a neighborhood and parked in front of a series of houses, just regular, nice houses, like suburban houses, separate yards and everything. And then it happened that they were taken by beings into what looked like a house, which must have actually been a UFO, but they made it look like a house in a
Mhm.
neighborhood and had the experiences that they both had. And they were returned to the house and to the car. And the white car that had been added was gone, but they kind of remembered how they found their way into that particular neighborhood and were able to get back on the highway, but without any conscious awareness of that whole experience of even getting off the highway. And they got back and still didn't remember. And then they ended up at the museum just before closing time. And that's why they were really startled that they had missed about 4 hours there. So,
Yeah.
so sometimes it's done very, very subtly by the beings, the way that they take somebody. And of course, as you probably know, it's very, very typical that when one person is taken from bed or from anywhere, uh, if there's anybody else present, those people are made to be not aware, non conscious. In fact, in the bed situation, if the sleeping partner is right there, uh, that person seems to be deeply, deeply asleep, unable to be awakened, including the fact that the person who's being taken from the bed is not able to move or call out to the other person. So you see, these beings have, well, I guess we could call it stealth, know, stealth methods of approaching the people they're taking and making anybody else completely unaware. So
Mhm.
nobody is harmed. The sleeping partner or somebody else sleeping in the room, for instance, or playmates with the person if this is a child, they're not harmed in any way. They're just made to be not aware.
Yeah.
Yeah,
One of the things that, I was made aware of by Mary Rodwell was that I wanna say, like, 86% of these experiences are what you might call positive or not they're not negative. Is that line up
right.
with your experience?
Absolutely. Yes, in fact, it's probably even a higher percentage. It's very, very rare, in my experience with people, that they are uh, treated horribly, or they're really, really scared. Um, but when they're in, I mean, because once they're in the experience, they're in sort of an altered state of consciousness and don't have usually the usual fear triggers, fear reactions that most of us would have if we saw something really different, like found ourselves in a round with bright white light and unusual beings and no other people. I mean, that would be frightening, I think, to most people because it's unknown and we don't know what to expect from them. So that has a lot to do with people's fear. And I think it's very customary or usual for an experiencer of this type to have fear. But um, even when people are being examined on a medical table in one of these experiences, and they're examined by beings who are definitely not human beings, and I have the person being regressed uh, to describe each one of those beings that they see around the table. And usually it's quite a variety of beings, too. You might have some taller grays, taller beings of different types, maybe blue skinned even. And you might have the little gray, more robotic types. You might have a reptilian type there. So I always, when the person in the regression finds himself or herself lying on it, what feels like sort of a hard medical table, and there are all these beings around, I always have them describe each being as much as possible, including what that being might be wearing, because they wear clothing that's different than ours. And as they're doing that in the regression, they're paying attention to those details of the beings around them and to the room and to the lighting and the size of the room it seems to be. And if there's anybody else in there, like any other people, very often there are people on other tables, like they
Ah,
are abducted people. Uh, and as they're describing all of this, their fear level seems to go down greatly because they're sort of taking hold of the situation, let's say,
settling in.
noticing these details. And while they're doing that, they're not feeling like a victim, which is helpful, of course. And then when the beings are actually doing something to them, very often it starts out feeling like, well, it feels like somebody's doing something to my head. And I'll say, well, pay attention to that to see how much you can determine from that. And I say, well, there's definitely one. No, actually, there were two beings there by my head at that side of the table. And they're touching my scalp. They're feeling things like they're feeling with fingertips, or oh, feels like they're opening up my head. They're apparently examining my brain. And I'll say, well, what does that feel like? And they say, well, it doesn't hurt. It should hurt, but it doesn't. But it really feels like my scalp is open and they're doing something there with my brain. And then in the meantime, there may be other beings, standing around other parts of their body, doing different things. And the person only goes by sensation and what little they can see that's being done. And as they describe it, little detail by detail, it seems to be less frightening. And they realize that, well, they seem to be perfectly all right, even though these very weird things are happening that normally we would think would be terrible. Uh, but the beings always have healing methods right there at the ready. No matter what they're doing, if there's any closing up of the scalp or that needs to be done or any other part of the body, they do it immediately and they seem to do it perfectly. I mean, they really have learned what they're doing. I
Yeah.
understand they're experts. So they don't really harm the person, even though at the moment it might seem like, oh my goodness, they're doing something, they're taking something out of my lower abdomen or they're going up through my vagina or whatever. Um, and yet they have not been harmed.
Mhm.
When they get back home again, very often they will have bruise or a little series of pinprick looking marks or a scoop shaped mark or
Yeah.
a triangular shaped bruise or mark of some sort. In other words, things on their body that they have maybe wondered about for decades as well, um, and that show that somehow something happened and they just don't know what it was, but it was on that weird night when they saw lights coming in the room or whatever. And so a lot of the pieces can come together for the person in the regression case.
Yeah.
Little details that they've been wondering about in some cases for many, many years.
How do they, in your experience, integrate that, therapeutically or cathartically? Like, how have you found them going through that experience, and what happens afterwards?
Good question. Well, uh, first of all, I think everybody who comes for this type of regression has expressed immediately afterwards, when they come back to regular consciousness, have expressed a great appreciation. Like, thank you so much. Wow, that really, really makes sense. Now I really understand what happened. That really helps to know. In other words, they're better off for having found out, no matter how weird the procedures were from their point of view that happened. They are very appreciative of knowing about it. And in many cases, just knowing that, oh, well, it wasn't as bad as they had feared. They had feared that maybe they were ruined in some way, and they find out that they weren't ruined. In fact, in many, many cases, people have been improved by being healed of many different conditions by the beings. And I think those are some of the most interesting to me. How do they get healed? Well,
Yeah.
it's beings standing around the table, and the beings have various forms of light that they use for the healing. And once in a while, it's that they will send energy from their hands, such as some of our healers and Reiki practitioners do here on Earth. But more likely, the healings happen. It was use of light, uh, to pure white light, or sometimes even colored light, but mostly white. And so they will have an apparatus which kind of looks like an oversized flashlight from our point of view, and it's emitting light and aimed at the part of the body that they're healing. Or sometimes uh, it's more like just a big flooding of light from above. And usually the people experiencing this say that, oh, that feels good. It feels warm and good. Thank you. Um, or sometimes they're completely um, encased in light, like it completely surrounds them and under their body and under the table that they're lying on. And a couple of people have described it seemed like a rolling pin made of light that rolls up from, maybe from their feet, rolling up to their legs and their torso, neck, head, and even above the head. And the healing is happening from that. So there are a number of different ways, but uh, always seeming to involve light or heat, like heat from the hands, if not light.
Yeah. I was injured for much of the past year and in a lot of pain. And one of
Oh,
the things that I did was Jacqueline Smith, whom you wrote about in Meet the Hybrids. I went to
right.
one of her healing classes, and so she
Oh,
had brought
good.
a mantis healing technique using light and orbs to
Oh,
heal. And so I was very, very grateful for her help with that. I found it very helpful. But the healing aspect that you talk about is one of the most fascinating things that I'm interested in. It's not
Oh,
the scary stuff. Is just these health uh, um, surgery things that they improve the body and abilities and things like that. It's quite fascinating.
oh, so did Jacqueline herself use the light to heal you?
Yeah, she was teaching how to use the light to focus it on the injured part of my body. So, like, in that case, it was my
Oh,
knee, but it was a technique that she learned from her lessons out there.
right. Well, she has had, well, a lifelong of so many contacts with quite a variety of beings and has
Yeah,
benefited greatly from them and has welcomed every time they had visited.
and
That's so,
she has abilities, and maybe you could kinda share just about what a hybrid is in your experience and maybe some other aspects of people like her that, whether it's
oh, right.
telepathy or other things too.
Oh, absolutely. There are a lot of commonalities between them. So, Miguel Mendonça and I, in 2015, wrote the book Meet the Hybrids, and Jacqueline Smith was one of those hybrids. I had already known her uh, to a minor extent before that, but she came together as one of the hybrids. And the seven others, we interviewed at great length, each one independently of each other. They didn't hear each other's interviews. They were not able to influence each other. And some of them were here in the United States, and some of those hybrids, two of them were actually in England, a man and a woman. But they all had very, very similar characteristics and similar types of experiences too. So anyway, how did they get created? That's a very interesting subject in itself. What happens is that a human woman is visited by the beings, and eggs are taken from her ovaries, and a man, if she's married, it would probably be her husband. If she's not with a man, would be taken from some other man of interest to the beings, and sperm would be taken from him. So in both cases, the woman and the man are usually not aware of anything. It just happens at night when they're asleep, and they're made to be very soundly asleep uh, by these beings are sort of out of conscious awareness. Anyway, the eggs from the woman and the sperm from the man are taken aboard the ship and they mix them together. In other words, conception happens. And then they add to that mixture their extraterrestrial genetics. And in the cases of the hybrids who we have written about, it was not just one type of extraterrestrial genetics that were added, but maybe two or three or four or five, or in one case, it's six different types of extraterrestrial beings, different species, added their genetics to this little embryo. And then the embryo is placed in the woman. Again, she's not aware of it, but she soon begins to be aware that, wow, she feels pregnant. And she'll go to the doctor and have that pregnancy confirmed, and ultrasound and everything they do. And she'll just take that for the full term if it's going to be a hybrid who will live on Earth. Is another type that I'll describe in a few moments. Uh, but she'll just take that little embryo into a fetus, for the full 9 months and give birth to it the way that we do. So that baby is a hybridized baby. And is going to be living the full life on Earth. So those those hybrid babies, at a very, very early age, even, let's say age 2 or so, they already show that they have healing abilities to heal others. And for a young child like that, it's very typical for many of these hybrids that if they've along the way seen a wounded animal or a wounded bird or something or a wounded person, um, they'll just go right into sharing energy as if doing Reiki healing. And the healing is very effective. The beings receiving the healing, heal up in a day or two and go about their life, you know, just fully recover. So the family will notice things like this, and the children, even at a very young age, will notice that, they do a lot of things and they know a lot of things that the rest of their family doesn't do and doesn't know. And then when they get into even preschool, they notice that they look the same, as every other human child. They don't look extraterrestrial at all, but that they know things that the other kids don't know, and that they can kind of see into other children's bodies and know that they have a stomach ache or they have a pain over this part of their abdomen or whatever, or they have a headache or, they have that kind of sight, and
Yeah, that
they
it just
they
blows my
don't.
mind that people have that ability.
I know, me too, because I don't have it. So, they'll see friends of their parents and they say, he has a problem with his kidneys. And the parents will use it. What? What are you talking about? How do you know that? Well, I just know. I just have a way of knowing. So they may not at that very early age realize, well, they don't usually realize at an early age that they are hybrid. They have some extraterrestrial genetics in them, but they do know that they have a whole range of psychic abilities that the other people around them usually don't have. And
Yeah,
and these perceptions and knowings, and sometimes they get messages. They just hear a message in their head, and it's from the beings who gave them the genetics. And they will have lots of visits too from the extraterrestrial beings. So, in the case of a young child, those visits will usually happen in the middle of the night when the parents and other family members, and this one himself or herself, so they won't know, although the hybrid child will know. And all of the hybrids, including Jacqueline, have said that, oh, they are happy when those beings from space come. And they all have said they feel like the extraterrestrial beings whom they know and whose genetics they have are their true family, more than the family they were born to and are growing up in. So parents don't like to hear that. We human parents, and so the parents were
sure.
using. No, you're mistaken about that. We watched you being born. You are ours. You were born to us. And they'll say, well, maybe so, but you're not my real parents. They're
Uh,
out there in space and they come and visit me sometimes. So it's a very different life for a hybrid child and a hybrid growing up. By the time they get into their 20s, they usually have had it confirmed by the beings that yes, they're one of theirs. They're no wonder they feel like, you know, we're your parents because in a sense we are.
Yeah.
Genetically we are. We haven't raised you, but yes, we are very, very dearly related. And that explains some of the feelings of love that the hybrids have had for them, and
Yeah, they definitely
the
share
total
that.
lack of fear. So they love visiting the spaceships and really appreciate anything that they're introduced to there that they're allowed to do on the spaceship. I mean, for many of them, it's just a great adventure, more exciting, more interesting than anything they get to do on Earth. It's
Yeah.
and the whole point of it, of these hybrids being gestated and born on Earth and living a whole lifetime on Earth, the whole point of that is to help humanity, like Jacqueline Smith is helping in many ways and doing courses and classes and webinars and lectures and uh, writing. She's written at least 2 books that I know of, maybe even 3 by now. And she also uh, is one of the hybrids who has great skills in animal communications.
Yeah.
And she is very psychically aware of animals wherever they are. And so uh, many times she has been brought in as a consultant to use her abilities to find lost animals. And that's
Mm.
wonderful. And then also she, as with the other hybrids, they can communicate telepathically with any other people who can do that. Most of us have the ability, but we've never developed it. So we assume we don't have the ability for telepathy. But she does communicate with other people, like with the other hybrids. Some of them communicate a lot, just simply telepathically. And anybody else,
She is very gifted. She's
yeah,
skilled. I've worked with her. I don't mind saying that. She's good. She knows what she's doing.
she's very good and just very delightful. A wonderful human who has these extraordinary abilities. And she has the ability to not only locate lost animals, but to communicate with them telepathically with many, many, many different species of animals. And another one of our hybrids in Meet the Hybrids, Julie Pita, she communicates with animals very frequently, including lots of reptiles. So, and she's very friendly with snakes and can communicate with them. So I have a picture of her holding up a very venomous snake. And she's not the least bit afraid because she's communicated with it and complimented it. So I think you're really beautiful. And I love the way you move. I love the way you live. And may I pick you up? And she hears, yes, that's all right, from the snake. And will carry them around and wrap them around herself. And um, even, very poisonous snakes. And when never, ever has been the least bit harmed because she's in very peaceful, reassuring communication with them.
Yeah. I mean, that's incredible.
Well,
With
yeah,
that aura, that energy though, that communication with animals and being like, that interconnectedness really comes out in these, people.
yes, yes, it certainly does. So uh, the point of having the hybrid program from the point of view of the beings who contribute to this is that the hybrid will be able to live a life here as a human, fully passing as human, and certainly looking, acting human, but with all these extra abilities. And that the hybrid will do the work of helping humanity that the beings would like to do, but they cannot come here and live here. They would not survive here, nor would we accept them. You know, so
Hmm.
they create these hybrids uh, so that the hybrids can do the work because of the ET genetics. They can do the work that the ETs would really like to have done here. So they're here to uh, create inspiration in people, raise their consciousness, increase their spirituality, and increase their helpfulness, their concern for the rest of humanity. So they very often inspire people to get into work that will be really helpful here on Earth. So I think
Yeah.
we're very blessed to have hybrids here, and I assume that there are probably hybrids in most places in the world. You know, living as one of those people, like a South American hybrid would be living, speaking Spanish and uh, having these skin, the complexion, and so forth of a South American person. The same with an Asian person would have the Asian characteristics and yet the extraterrestrial genetics in them too. So I think that these helpers are really all over the world, living in
And
less than other places.
you hear stories too, and I know you've written and spoken about this, but just you said stealth before, but cloaking or shape shifting, like there is, uh, I think her name is Charmaine, maybe, but in your book,
Oh, yeah,
the
Charmaine.
reptilian shapeshifter, Charmaine.
Yeah. Yes. Well,
She,
that's a remarkable thing in itself. I never heard of that until, oh, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. But Charmaine has a few different types of extraterrestrial genetic in her, including reptilian. And growing up until her early 20s, uh, she always liked anything that she would see pictures or films or even in person of any kind of reptile. And she just felt somehow she was related to them. It didn't make sense logically, and her parents didn't understand that. But she just said, "Yeah, there's snakes and toads and frogs and alligators and crocodiles and you know all kinds of snakes um, that that she just really liked tremendously, like other children might particularly like dogs or bears or something like that. But
mhm,
she reptiles. And then when she was in her early 20s, sort of living with this sense of really liking reptiles a whole lot. And I think nobody else she knew really particularly liked reptiles. Uh, but in her early 20s, she had a visit from some of the beings who had added their genetics. And one of them that sort of stood out to her was a reptilian extraterrestrial being. And she said, "Oh yeah, I really really like you. I really have great interest in you." And he said, "Well, because you have reptilian DNA in you, among the other types, would you like to experience your reptilian form?" And she said, "Yes, I would." I don't know if I would say yes to that, but she did. She did. God bless her. And they helped her to morph into her full reptilian form, and she was so pleased oh, this is magnificent. I feel so strong, so able. I feel magnificent being a reptilian. And I don't think that experience lasted terribly long. I mean, it wasn't days or
Mhm.
anything like that, maybe a few hours. And then after that, later in her life, there were occasions when occasionally she would morph into that. Somehow the U.S. government or some department of the government um, became aware of her and how she could morph into the reptilian form. And they abducted her and took her to an underground facility. And I think, I may not be remembering this clearly, but I think they gave her an injection of something that
That's correct. Yeah.
helped her to morph into her uh, reptilian form, so they could study her. And there she was in her reptilian form, uh, in a
Yeah.
room, and nothing else in it. And then she noticed up on the wall, it looked like sort of a dark window, but she recognized, because of her psychic ability, she realized it was one of those two-way mirrors. And there were three
Mhm.
human beings sitting on the other side of that window, observing her as she was. So it was definitely not a nice experience. And she did escape from that room, and they apparently chased her down the hallway. And by the time she got to where there was an exit to come up to the land, she was morphing back into her human form and was able to get out of there and find her way home again. But yeah, there definitely is interest. So that was one of the less pleasant experiences of morphing, because of the humans, not because of the reptilians. Yeah,
But there's this theme of almost like this big science experiment. They're helping us here with the hybrids, further in consciousness and humanity. And then also, like, our government is trying to study and see what's going on and
right.
perhaps know more than we know.
I know. I mean, there's a sort of different levels of things
Yeah,
going on.
there does seem to be different
Most
levels of,
people.
like, the surface level stuff and then the other things that exist beyond that.
Well, two other of the hybrids in our study um, had been known to morph completely into their reptilian form too, even though
Mm,
they have other species of genetics in them. Right. So
okay.
it's definitely happened and it's been witnessed. In fact, there are two people whom I've met personally in life, and on each occasion, I was talking to each one. These are totally separate people, occasionally, even in different countries. These two incidents happened. Well, I was talking to the person, just a regular, normal human conversation, the hybrid person, uh, looking perfectly human. Uh, in the first case, I did not know that woman was a hybrid, and I still have not had confirmation of that. But I think that she is, because as we were talking and having a regular, relaxed, nice conversation, plenty of light for us to see each other in, uh, just standing talking, then I noticed after a few minutes that her eyes were changing from the round pupils and round irises to the vertical slits. And as I watched her eyes change, her whole demeanor changed. She went from very relaxed and interested and, nodding and having a nice conversation, uh, suddenly to, oh, oh, Barbara, you've got to watch out. You're in danger. You don't know what you're fooling with. you're really in trouble. Oh, you really got to watch. You've got to really, really protect her. And I mean, she just, her whole self became, she still looked human, but
Mhm.
the whole presentation, the whole expression was entirely different. It went suddenly into terror and, you know, caution, watch out. And I was just fascinated. It just kept looking at her eyes as she was shooting all this, you know, danger information to me.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I decided, you know, this is fascinating. I'm not going to buy into the danger. I'm just going to watch and see what's happening here. And
Yeah.
and then we were interrupted. I wonder if she might have gone into a reptilian form herself, but we were interrupted. We were on a sort of a seminar tour, and the tour bus came to take us to, this is in Bali, Indonesia, and to
Mm.
take some Bali temples. And so we stopped talking. We got separately on the bus and never talked again the rest of that trip. But it was very pronounced. And then the other woman was Cynthia Crawford, one of our hybrids on a whole different occasion in a different country, even. And we're standing with a small group of people talking in a room in the evening and sort of a gathering. And as we were watching or talking, I noticed that her eyes were changing. And I said, and I knew that she had the ability to change into her full reptilian form too. So I just said, by any chance, do you feel anything different happening with your eyes right now? And she said, yeah, I feel sort of a pressure. Why? And I said, well, because I see your pupils changing into vertical pupils. And she said, oh, good. And she broke away from our little group and ran into the ladies' room nearby to look in the mirror and see it for herself. Because she said, I've had that happen before, and then people have commented on it, and I have changed into my full reptilian form. Um, and I just wanted to see that as it was beginning to happen. So, anyway, she did not turn into her reptilian form in front of us, although I wish that she had, because I would like to experience that. But
Yeah.
so she remained human, and the changing didn't continue to happen.
So was that like a validation for you to see, I know that
Oh,
not the full form, but just, the work that you do and seeing that with your own eyes?
oh yes, in both cases, I was very grateful for getting to witness that.
When I've heard you talk about synchronicities. When I first started doing past life regressions not long after, I met someone who could recall a past life in vivid detail consciously, which
Mhm.
surprised
Oh,
me.
well,
And
yes,
then I
that's
met
really
a
New York.
young child who could remember all of their past lives, like, had a
Yeah.
recall of that, and that blew me away. But it was, like, the synchronicity of, like, "Okay, I've learned this new technique, I'm starting to explore it, doing my own past life regression," and then, these people came into my world with which, it seemed synchronistically, "Okay, here you go."
Well, I agree. That's happened to me in so many ways. And so I had a child come in. Let's see, he must have been age 4. Came in with his mother for to my therapy practice, and everything was normal. He came because the parents had just separated, and he was very concerned about what his life would be like when he get to see Papa the way he used to every day. Anyway, we were dealing with that, reassuring to him, the mother and I. And then as they were just leaving my counseling room, um, he said, out of the blue, something about, well, in my last lifetime, something. And then he went on with whatever that was. And so I said, oh, okay, you remember that? And he said, yes, I do. I said, oh, okay, well, who were you? Anyway, then we sat down. I
Uh-huh.
thought, oh, wow, this is precious. One of these children who remembers the past life. And
Yeah.
in our culture, that's not, very much talked about. Yeah. And he had not
No.
looked at with his parents, even though his parents believed in that. But as it turned out, but anyway, he said, "Oh well, my name was da 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 da," and I was a boy, and then I grew up, and it was in near Ogden, Utah, and he named the town, and he told all about his family and about his siblings and what his father did for work and what his mother did after a while when the kids were old enough, what she did for work, and about the woman he married, and then their children. This is called conscious recollection.
Yeah.
So I affirmed all that and said I really, really appreciated his sharing that. Unfortunately, his mother was okay with that too. Many mothers wouldn't
Yeah.
be, but she was. And then, okay, that was when he was 4. When he was 7, I was invited by a film company in Hollywood to um, regress a child. So he of course, is the one I thought of. Other children I knew wouldn't have remembered past lives. I don't think, not that I know of anyway. So anyway, I got permission from his parents to come in, and the company came and they um, filmed him as he was going through that same lifetime that he had told us about, but with more detail, even. But he had remembered it consciously. I consciously remembered a tremendous amount. It was really remarkable. And then, to our surprise, he said, that wasn't really my last life. That was my last long life. But there was another short one. It is just the regression. And I said, okay, well, would you be willing to go to that one? And he said, yes. Turned out he was a girl who died at about age 10, and that it was okay. It was a tragedy for her family, but not for her because her soul had decided to come in for just to experience a few years of life on Earth and then leave. So she conveniently developed some sort of condition that took her life. And
Yeah.
and the soul, this is the soul at this point speaking, and he said, so that was fine. Yeah, I did what I wanted to do, just have a short life as a girl, since I'd had that long life as a man. Uh, and now I come into this life as a boy again, a male, and I can have as long a life as I want to, and it will definitely be a lot longer than the life of when I was a girl for 10 years. So,
Yeah.
so that I thought that was really interesting, and
Yeah.
interesting. He remembered consciously as much as he had remembered. Yeah.
It's so interesting. And that also carried forward when I started doing work with experiencers and encountering, I get nervous as a licensed therapist talking about these things, but I admire you speaking so freely about it. But it just
Yeah.
my own UFO experience, talking about like Arcturian beings and then having not a interaction with beings necessarily, but the consciousness of ships interacting with me. Um,
Oh, great.
and so it was a validation for me, like, okay, they're here. They're
This
just
is
saying
real.
hi.
Right.
This is real, right? Like we're
Yeah.
real, like we're really here because you have that question, like, is this real?
Right.
Um, can you share some synchronicities and maybe some validations that you've received? I think you've had
Oh,
Some
well,
interesting
I've
experiences.
actually had 4 encounter experiences, uh, which I did not know. They hadn't happened yet when I began doing this work with other people and their experiences. But right along with becoming very, very involved in this part of my work as a therapist, in 1991, I also uh, began a 27-year-long uh, investigation of crop circles. So I went to England every summer, 27 years to study the crop circles. And after a few years, I started leading groups, which I would set up to make all the arrangements for and drive around so that we could visit crop circles. It was just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful adventure. And after I'd been doing that for 3 years, one morning I was working with a client who did many regressions with me to her extraterrestrial experiences. And she, in some of our sessions, would channel an extraterrestrial being. And it was the same extraterrestrial being. So I felt that I was developing a friendship with him. And anyway, in the winter of 1994, having done 3 summers of crop circle work, he said, Barbara, I noticed that you're very, very interested in the crop circles. And if you would like to, you could be taken for the making of a crop circle. What an offer. And then, huh. And I said, well, I don't know. I'll have to think about that. Because I thought if it involved beings coming in a ship and taking me, I just know that I don't know if I'm ready for that. And I would hope that I get returned safely to the same place and everything. What if I weren't? So anyway, for about 6 months, I thought about that. And the channeling session before I was to leave for England for visiting crop circles for about 6 weeks. That's how I was going to be gone. I told him in the channeling that I would like to accept that offer to be taken for the making of a crop circle. And what do I do, to allow that to happen? And he said, well, you need to talk with them. You may not know who they are, the beings, but just send out those thoughts and wishes, desire to be taken, and keep it up for a while. Don't just say a couple of things, just keep it going. So on the way to the airport, and this is Southern California, heading toward Los Angeles Airport, the afternoon that I was going to be flying, I was talking out loud in my car alone to whomever they were. I didn't know what to picture or whom to ask for. Just said those who are involved in making crop circles, please hear me. And I asked and I praised them for all the beautiful work they had been doing and what I thought their motivation was, and that it was a helpful, very benign, generous thing to do. And I did that for 45 or 50 minutes. Got to the airport, took the plane, went to England, got very involved in doing everything in England. And then at the night before the last day in which I could have been seeing crop circles still out in the countryside, I realized, well, I don't think anything like that has happened, and the trip is almost over. And so I asked again, just very briefly this time. And then the next thing I knew, as I was getting into bed in the inn I was staying in southern England, suddenly I saw 3 short beings coming from the area of the window, and there was some night light coming through the window, no light in the room at this point, and coming toward me. And then when they got closer, I was out conscious awareness, didn't know a thing, and got up the next morning with the alarm clock waking me. Went and in a double-decker bus with the whole group I was with, and I was the one to find a new crop circle in a specific field, and was the first one to. I left the group and joined a friend following in a rented car, and we and a couple of other people went in. We were the first ones in a brand new, beautiful, sparkly, pristine crop circle that had obviously just been made. And so that was wonderful. And then I found out a couple of weeks later, back home again, had a regression, and that all the details of that experience that happened after the three little beings came to me from the area of the window, and the subconscious part of the mind, luckily, let me know and remember, relive every bit of that experience. So I had been on board a small craft, and they made the crop circle by sending down something. It sounded like a big swooshing sound from the middle of this little craft, which was very close to where I was sitting. And we made a pattern. It seemed to be going around in a circle, swoosh, 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 and then a ring around it. And and that's exactly what the crop circle looked like. It was made that night.
Yeah.
Too, and then by the end of the day, we saw aerial photographs of it. And there's
What was the meaning of that crop circle?
Well, it was the last one in a long series of crop circles that was following the Shoemaker-Levy comet going across the sky and hitting planet Jupiter. And the newspapers there in England, every time a piece of the comet, there were 21 pieces of this comet, and every time a piece would hit Jupiter in basically the same location that the other ones had hit, there would be a picture of that, or of the collision site on Jupiter. And I could sort of follow it in terms of the crop circles. Each time a piece of the comet would hit Jupiter, there would be another crop circle with one fewer piece in the tail until they were all done. And then this crop circle I've been describing, the one I was there for the making of, that was showing, I think, that it was all, that whole phenomenon was wrapped up. In other words, showed the circle one bigger, one slightly smaller, slightly smaller, slightly smaller, all the way around, forming a circle, and then a big ring enclosing that circle. So I think it was showing that phenomenon that was happening out in the sky was all wrapped up. It was finished.
So the completion.
Yeah. I mean, and how perfect. So that whole experience of wanting to be taken for the making of a crop circle and being responded to, it seems to me that got the attention of some other kinds of beings out there in space. And so 3 years later, when I was driving down a California freeway from Santa Barbara to Ventura and then eventually to Claremont, where I lived at the time, about a 2.5-hour drive, another abduction happened that I had not asked for. But, and my car and I were taken together. And there was evidence on the car that something had definitely happened to it. And I thought that's great. There's proof. There's proof of this one. So anyway, that was more for uh, the beings taking information from my brain. They said, bringing
Okay.
all the experiences that I had regressed people to that involved extraterrestrials. So, in other words, there were a lot of the beings who were interested in that information that this one human happened to have, because I'd done a lot of regressions by that time. And I mean, probably a few hundred at that time. And I was regressed on that occasion by Dolores Cannon. You know, is so wonderfully uh, well known for all that she brought through the regressions that she did. And so she,
Yeah, I just met her daughter a couple weeks ago.
what, Julia?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and her
yeah.
granddaughter. But yeah, they're delightful. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, oh, yeah, you know, well, they're wonderful, wonderful people. So is Dolores. And so she, the investigator part of her, kept asking the being, the main being, there were a lot of little beings around, but whom I thought were absolutely adorable. But then there was one tall, very white being, and with really big eyes, and she was asking him. So most of that regression was her asking questions through me and his answering through me, and I would pass it on to her. And it was so interesting. And he suggested that there were many beings who would like to know this information that he was taking from my brain with some sort of apparatus that had been attached to my head. And that there were many beings who, of different types, who were interested in this, and that he would broadcast this information from my brain about people who had ET experiences, and other ETs would tune in, like we tune into a radio station or television station, he said, and they would get all of this information. And those who don't care about that information just simply wouldn't tune into it. It makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so anyway, he gave lots and lots of information about his type and some of the others and the agendas. And then after a couple of hours, Dolores said, "Oh, we're going to have to finish. I have another appointment to get to," and the tape had run out too by that time. And he said, "If you want to do this again, if you want to find out more information from me, just do what you did today." In other words, the regression, and I'll give you whatever you want in terms of information. So 2.5 months later, we met closer to Los Angeles when she came out here to do workshops or appointments. And this time, each of us had a long list of questions we wanted to ask him. And, and he was wonderful about answering them. He knew that that's what that session was for. And that she put that material into the last 2 chapters of a book she was just finishing at the time. This was 1997. And that book is called The Custodians by Dolores
yeah,
Cannon. And the last 2 chapters are from this information from this regression, although she calls me Bonnie the investigator rather than Barbara the therapist. That wasn't, I was giving a lot of lectures already, but about extraterrestrial experiences, but I wasn't ready to have that known that I too was
yeah.
having my second experience. Since then, it's been perfectly fine, but I wasn't
That's
ready. Yeah.
wonderful.
So then there were 2 more after that, different years and different types. And one of them was a reptilian male who suddenly appeared one afternoon in my living room, and we held hands like a handshake position, and he communicated with me telepathically. It must have been telepathically because I didn't hear him with my ears and I didn't see a mouth move. But
Mhm.
he was there for, I guess, 5 or 6 minutes at least, um, just giving information and perspective and
Did you
appreciation.
ask for that, or was it just
Well, no, I never ever imagined that such a thing would happen. But it was real, very real. And then another one, see, in 2008, I believe it was, um, uh, Nadine Lawrence and I wrote a book about extraterrestrial experiences called Alien Experiences is the title of the book. And we had just finished writing that with uh, a, a number of cases that I had worked with. And then she was an experiencer. So she described her experiences. And we just finished writing it. We hadn't gotten it to a publisher yet, but we had just finished the writing. And a different group of beings took me up into a craft that looked like a round, a spherical shaped ball of cotton candy, peachy pink colored cotton candy. That's what it looked like. I don't know what the material really was. Uh,
Mhm.
and I was standing there on that kind of floor, cotton candy floor, but there was enough to stand on. Or this might have been an astral experience. I'm just not sure whether I went with my body or went without my body. But anyway,
Mhm.
it was a whole row of about 8 very tall, very, very slim beings who almost seemed to be attached to each other, kind of lined out like that. And I could just barely see that there were eyes. They were kind of misty or almost invisible. And
Yeah.
they very kindly, beautiful beings who just sort of moved like that, kind of undulated a little bit, and all
Flowing.
at the same time, like 8 of them. And they were just beautiful and seemed very peaceful, very loving. And they came closer all together and they told me, well, they started out by saying, Barbara. So I knew they were talking to me. Uh, we are so pleased that you and your friend have written the book you have just completed. And they told about how they wanted more and more people on Earth to know about the existence of them and the other beings. And they understood that most humans didn't know that there were others living in space. And it's about time that we wake up and that we do know. So they're very, very pleased that we were trying to bring this truth out, and they appreciated the work I was doing. And basically, that was that for oh several minutes, and then I was returned, and the next thing I knew, I was standing in the hallway where this experience had started, and went on with the rest of my day, and was regressed the next day. Well, it was nice and fresh to that experience. So,
So
uh,
you knew, like, I wanna unpack this experience.
yes, right.
Mm.
So they've all been very interesting and very good, in my opinion. I'm very grateful to have had each one of them, and especially that they're different types of beings. In other words, I feel very convinced from my experiences and other people's as well that there are many, many, many different kinds of beings that have to do has something to do with some human beings.
Hmm.
And I've never come across any that really seem to be threatening or out to harm us in any way or take over the world or things that you hear people wondering about sometimes.
Yeah.
If the aliens will ever take over the world. Well, these beings that I've had contact with think they have nothing to do with anything of that sort.
Well, I
And
guess they could if they wanted to.
oh yes, I mean, between all of them and the incredible skills they have, the technology and the psychic paranormal skills they have, and they certainly could have taken us anytime, a long time ago. Up to they could be taking us now, and they're not. That's not what it's about. I think there really is a lot going on out there in space that we usually don't know about. In other words, there are skirmishes and wars, I think, going on from one planet to another. There apparently is a very long history of that. One of the books that has talked a lot about that is called The Book of Urantia, which is all channel material from, quite a number of decades ago. Um, and
What was
there
the
are
name?
the book of, it's called The Book of Urantia, Urantia.
Okay.
It doesn't have a regular author, I think, because it's been channeled. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would. You mentioned synchronicities. One of the synchronicities that happened to me was way back in 1977. My husband and our three children were on a camping trip in Hawaii. We would rent a camper vehicle, that we could all sleep in. And
Yeah.
we went to, I think it was the island of Molokai. And when we went to pick up the camper van to sleep in, we had a conversation with the man who was renting the equipment. And to my surprise, he took me aside and gave me the Book of Urantia, which I had never heard of at that time. And he said, I think you would be very interested in this. And I was. I was reading it every night while we were on that island with a flashlight under the bed covers because the others wanted to sleep. But anyway, so I got an introduction to the fact that there are all these different species out there, many of them, and many of them have had wars with each other and taken over each other's planets and intermingled with them, interbred with them. And anyway, so that was back in the late 1970s, and I had no thought in my mind on the horizon or anywhere about there really being extraterrestrial beings out there in space, and
Yeah.
that the cosmos is full of life, even if we hadn't known about it. So that was, and how that man knew that I would be interested in that, I don't know. And he also, I think, must have known that my husband at the time would not be interested at all. I mean, he was a good tourist.
Yeah.
Went down and totally not interested in anything of this sort whatsoever, and didn't want to ever hear about it. So that's why I was reading under the covers.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
so interesting. That's so interesting. The
no.
for I did a past life regression, and a friend of mine did one too, and that was the first time he said he came back and I'm like, "What happened?" He goes, "Well, apparently I'm an alien called a Pleiadian." And I'm
Oh,
like, "What
wow.
is a Pleiadian?"
What alien? Yeah. Probably, but
I
yeah.
apologize because I didn't know. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't know what happened, like but then
Well,
later on, like, okay, there's more things out here than I understand at the moment. But from that therapist lens to having an open mind and being curious, like, you have that in droves that led you
right.
down this path after these synchronicities and everything else. It's just truly,
Oh, right.
amazing.
And I had certainly never expected anything like this earlier in my life.
Yeah. Barbara, I could talk to you forever, but I what in your mind, is most needed maybe for kind of the time now or just the experience or community? I know that you're big into the support groups and things like that.
Right.
Is there a need that, a younger therapist like me might be open to or providing?
Well, if you find that you have two or three or more people who come to you for regressions and find out that they've had extraterrestrial encounters, you might suggest to them that you get together as a group and share because people really appreciate knowing that they're not alone in these unusual things. And with my group, I started regressing people to extraterrestrial encounters in 1991. And then by 1994, I had reason to count how many people was I working with about, this type of thing. And I realized I have 17 people, and a couple of them asked if I knew of anybody else having these types of experiences. I said, yes, indeed, I do. And they said, well, are they around here? This was in Southern California. And I said, yes, they are. And they asked to be introduced to them. So I formed a little experiencer support group with those 17 people. And that group went from 1994 till I moved away from that area in 2017. So during all of those years, some people continued the whole 17 years of coming to the group. And once in a while, somebody would move away or drop out for one reason, and a new person would come in. And I always said I have a requirement for being in this group, and that is that you do at least one regression with me. Because I wanted to know if they really were an experiencer or just interested in it, you know? And so everybody who actually came to the group had at least one regression. So, and then of course they kept having experiences as the years went on too. Some of them more than others, and then they come in. Well, guess what happened to me 2 nights ago? And anyway, we did not only reporting about the experiences, but really trying to do a lot of thinking about it, a lot of figuring about it, and people would begin to bring in things that they had read about this phenomenon. And so we really learned a lot and shared a lot, and everybody appreciated what each other had been experiencing. So it was a wonderful, wonderful thing. I remember and we would meet once a month at my home as a potluck supper. And so it was a really nice social occasion as well. We'd be together for 4 or 5 hours, sometimes even longer. And some people wanted to stay. Uh, and everybody feeling more and more comfortable, more and more normal and natural about the fact that they were having these unusual experiences. And so what's a service that you could give, uh, or even just having a little threesome, two of your experiencer clients and you until it grows bigger, it will probably be growing bigger somehow. Uh,
Yeah.
at the international UFO conferences and other big UFO conferences, I used to lead experiencer groups too. And often we would have 50 or 60 people in one of those groups. So not everybody spoke, but those who wanted to always had the chance to speak.
Hmm.
And we had the rule that nobody could criticize anybody else for what they were saying or in any way. And I mean, we had to all be open minded and hear the person's experience as the person was telling it. Um, and in many cases, those people who shared had not had any regressions done, but they were sharing whatever the little bits and pieces, which were important bits and pieces, that's for sure. Uh, and they always felt so good at putting it into words with other people who would receive it, who would not make fun of it or just fluff it away or say, oh, you've got to be making it up or, it must have been a dream. I always insisted that we listen with an open mind and a heart too.
Yeah.
Uh, that these are things that people have really experienced that have meant a lot to them. So there's no acceptability to putting it down, whatever anyone is sharing. So um, those were very helpful, people said too. Sometimes people would go to the UFO conferences mostly to attend the experiencer groups, because they had had experiences that they
Yeah.
wondered that they couldn't really explain. And they felt different and just didn't usually have anybody to talk to about that sort of thing. So I think it's
Yeah.
one that you are doing the work that you're doing and anybody else who's doing it. And, just allowing the people who come to you for this particular reason to know more about that and
Yeah. I
accepted by you, to come to you in the first place, they would have a certain amount of respect for you because of your position as a therapist. And so it means a lot if you as a therapist, hear them, take it in and accept what they're saying. You don't have to necessarily believe every little bit of it yourself, but at least accept it that this is what they truly think that they have experienced, and they probably have. In
yeah.
fact, yeah. And just to, I have people even call me now, people who had come maybe even years ago for a regression or two or three, and will say, oh, I'm so glad I could find you that I could still talk about this because I haven't found anybody else in all of these years to really talk to about these experiences that I've had.
Hmm.
Generally speaking, people have not been aware of extraterrestrial visits. It's becoming more known all the time, I think now. Uh, but way back when I started this, nobody could find anybody to talk to about this who didn't just think they were cuckoo.
Yeah. Yeah. You are, you're a pioneer.
Yeah.
So thank you, for, paving the way for people like me to learn more about this topic and, expand on that.
Oh,
It's
wonderful.
truly
I'm so
amazing to get to
glad.
talk to you and have you share your wisdom and experiences. How can people find you, Barbara?
Okay, well, there are two ways. I have a website, which is barbara-lamb.com. Lamb Regression.com. I'll repeat that. Barbara Lamb, Lamb, Regression.com. And then there's a YouTube channel, which has, probably 20 or maybe more uh, individual podcasts about, some are about this subject, some are about other unusual subjects, and always having something to do with my own experiences and others. And that YouTube channel is Barbara Lamb ET Regression. Barbara Lamb ET Regressions. So on both of those sites, there are a number of different interviews. Some of them will cover material that we've talked about tonight, some with other material that we haven't talked about. But I think it's all interesting material. So, and then, of course, if anybody wanted to contact me for a regression, the way to do that would be to go to the website, barbaralandregression.com, and scroll down, and there's a place where you can type in a message, and that gets forwarded to my email. And then when I can, sometimes there's a little time gap in there, I I type back, I email back a response telling about the regressions and when I do them and the cost. We can do them in person in San Diego, where I am, or we can do them online. There are a number of online services that work really, really well. And those appointments are just as good, just as helpful online as the ones in person, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
yeah, so there's plenty of way to get in touch with me. And on the website, there are 5 books which I have co-authored, and they can be ordered there, and you pay through PayPal. And I get the notice from PayPal and send out the book with my signature and a brief message to each individual person. So that's nice too.
Absolutely. I will be doing both. And I will put the links to both the YouTube channel and to your website as well.
All right. Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
Barbara, is there anything that you would like to share to someone maybe who's listening who might think that they're an experiencer? Any parting wisdom that you might share with them?
Well, just keep opening up and learning, and learn as much as you can, and be aware as much as you can. And sometimes even a person will, have a little tiny bit of an experience that they recall, and not the whole context. So if they would just sit quietly in sort of a meditative state and think about that little teeny bit that they do know, sometimes it sort of opens up into knowing more about what happened in that particular experience. So, and another thing is that you can always, if you think that you're having some of these experiences with extraterrestrials, you can always ask them for help with something. And I think truly from many people's experiences and my own, I think that they will give help, kind of like a spirit guide. Sometimes people ask their spirit guides for help with a particular situation, and suddenly they get the inspiration. They don't know where it came from, but they get the inspiration of a way to uh, get some help with that particular situation. And I think that's the same with the ETs, who are very attentively focused on certain people here in the world. And
Yeah.
that there's more of a line that's possible to be open between us and the beings, much more so than we would guess. So, in other words, keep opening and expanding, asking, being aware of anything unusual that's happening to you too, unusual markings you have on your body or missing time or, nighttime visits or whatever that seem, well, I wonder what that was. Give some time and attention to that. And of course, if you could find somebody to help you with a regression, somebody who's very open to this whole area of reality, that is a wonderful, wonderful help too. Helps you put a lot of things together, a lot of little
Yeah.
hints and bits and pieces. So many blessings to all of you who are experiencing this, and many blessings to those of you who are not experiencing it, but are open to learning about it. That's wonderful too.
Barbara Lamb, thank you so much for your time this evening.
You're welcome. Right. It's been a delight. And thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you for joining me on the Journey Mindfulness podcast, where we explore the edges of consciousness, the depth of the soul, and the practices that bring it all into daily life. If you enjoyed today's conversation, follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you're ready to go deeper, I offer a free consultation to explore how we can work together through psychotherapy, quantum healing, or one-on-one transformational coaching. Visit JourneyMindfulness.com to learn more and schedule your free consultation. Until next time, stay present, stay curious, and enjoy the journey.